Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a police officer and a member of the public at a police station. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good afternoon, madam. How can I help you?
Oh, hello. I think my passport has been stolen and the embassy told me to register it with you.
Sorry to hear that, madam. Let me find a form to take some details. Okay, here we are. So, I need to take some information about you and what's happened, and then I can give you a crime reference number to give to your embassy. Okay. Right, let's start with the information on the passport. What's your surname?
It's Ms. Walsh. That's W-A-L-S-H.
And your first name?
Chloe.
Okay, Ms. Walsh. And can I take your date of birth?
Yes, it's the 5th of July, 1987.
Okay, I've got that here. And next, I'm going to need to take your place of birth.
I was born in Ireland.
I need the city or town, madam.
Oh, it was the capital, Dublin.
And do you know your passport number?
I have a copy of it somewhere. Oh, yes, here you go. It's 323682.
That's 323682. Great. Now I need to take some contact details in case we need to contact you or if we find the passport. Can I take a phone number?
Yes, my mobile number is 07780 367 021.
So that's 07780 367 012.
No, it ends 021.
Oh, okay. And your email address?
It's chloe.walsh@email.com.
And finally, can I take your address, please?
It's 97 East Street in Brighton, and the postcode is BN12SE.
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Okay, now I need to make a few notes about what happened. You say that your passport was stolen?
Well, I'm not sure. It was either stolen from my pocket or I dropped it and lost it.
Okay, madam. Well, you need to report it with us whether it was lost or stolen. You said that it was in your pocket.
That's right. I kept it in the pocket of my jacket because I thought it would be safer there.
Okay, well, there has been a number of people reporting pickpocketing recently, so maybe it was stolen from your pocket. When was this?
It was last Wednesday.
So that's Wednesday, the 21st of July.
That's right.
And do you know where it's happened?
Well, I'm not sure exactly. In the afternoon, I went to meet a friend, and I know I had it with me then because I felt it in my pocket before I left.
And where did you meet your friend?
In Green Cafe on the High Street.
And what did you do after that?
So, I went for a walk along the High Street and was going to walk home, but it started raining, so I decided to get the bus home. I think I got home around 4:30, and it was then that I realised I didn't have my passport with me anymore.
Was it a crowded bus?
Yes, the bus stop and the bus were very crowded.
Okay, that's often when pickpocketing happens on busy buses and trains.
Really? I didn't notice anything.
Yes, you often don't. They're very good at what they do. OK, madam, that's all the information that I need. I'll give you a crime reference number now, which they might ask you for when you get your new passport. The number is A135970.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure, it's A135970.
OK. Well, thanks for your help.
No problem, madam. Have a nice day.
That is the end of part 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 2.
You will hear an instructor giving a talk before a kayaking trip. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello everybody, welcome to Southdown Kayaking. I'm going to be your instructor today. Can I just ask if anybody has been kayaking before? No? Okay, great, so everybody's a beginner. Today, we're going to do a special type of kayaking called sit-on-top kayaking. Right, let me first give you some safety information and then I'll tell you a little more about what we're going to do today. You can see all the boats over there. They are kind of the same as canoes. They are made of the same plastic material and they are a similar shape. The biggest difference is that with kayaks, you sit on top of the boat, whereas you get into a canoe and your legs are covered in the boat. This difference has both good points and bad. Many people say it makes it easier to get on the boat and you also feel more free as your legs aren't trapped in the boat. It's also so much easier to get into the water in the beginning. But when lots of beginners start, one thing they don't like is that they feel more unstable. It does feel just like you are sat on the water and there's nothing to stop you falling in. Let's talk about falling in. It will happen. At some point today, you're going to fall off your boat and into the water. So you need to know what to do. Now, it is quite difficult to get back on the boat in deep water. So I don't suggest you try that today. Just stay by your boat and we'll come and help you. Avoid trying to swim to the land, or you may get hit by a boat. Another thing I need to mention is the clothing we're wearing. Obviously, we all need life jackets and helmets on when we're in the water, but I notice some of you are wearing heavy trousers and coats. Now, you might think they'll keep you warm in the boat, but when you do fall in, they are very heavy and will be difficult to move around in. So you will need to change into lightweight clothes.
Before the talk continues, you have some time to look at the questions 15 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 15 to 20.
Okay, we're nearly ready to go, but I'm just going to show you on this map what route we're going to take today. So, we're in the boathouse here on the south side of the river at the left of the map. Can you see that? Right next to us is a great fish restaurant, which many people choose to go back to later. It's the perfect place to enjoy an evening meal with a lovely view of the wood across the river at sunset. Now, once we get onto our boats, we will be going along the river up to the top to where it gets wider. You can see that we'll be going under 2 bridges. Soon after going under the first one, we will approach the first of two bends in the river. At this point, we'll pass the old rivermaster's house on the right, where the rivermaster used to collect money from people using the river. This is my favourite of the many historical buildings on this stretch of the river. Not long after this, we will get to the second bend and the impressive stone bridge, which, by the way, is nearly 1,000 years old. We will stop here briefly to let you take a picture of it and the old mill which stands on the far bank just beyond the bridge. Continuing further down, the river will begin to open up. On the left, you will see the car park and cafe, but we will actually stop for tea and a snack at the picnic spot on the island in the middle. It's a really nice place to stop and just be surrounded by nature. By the time we finally do get off the river, you may want to make use of the toilet facilities, which you can find behind the cafe. And I nearly forgot. I should also mention that those of you who will be camping overnight can either leave your kayaks at the car park and walk to the campsite, or paddle back down the river in them. You'll find it just before you get to the footbridge on the north bank beside the wood. If you are staying overnight at the campsite, you can use this bridge to get over to the restaurant. Okay, shall we go and see if we can get on these boats?
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 3.
You will hear a discussion between two students about a psychology project. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Hi, Greg. Are you ready to get started on this end-of-year psychology project?
Hi, Sophie. I think so. I spent all yesterday evening doing background reading. We've such a lot to think about today. Anyway, I've got a cup of coffee and a free afternoon. Let's see what we can do.
Okay, great. So last time we spoke, if I remember correctly, we decided to look into the psychology of smell.
Yes, that's right. We both agreed it's a fascinating area, but that we wanted to be 100% confident before talking to Professor Ingram about it. So, are you still happy with this topic?
Yes, well, honestly, I just couldn't stop reading about it when I got home. At first I felt that there'd already been quite a lot of research carried out on the relationship between the olfactory system and the human mind, so I wondered whether perhaps we were in danger of just repeating old experiments. However, I then thought that it's really such a broad area of study that we could just choose a new angle.
I had a similar feeling. Plus, we can easily move to another approach if Professor Ingram doesn't like this one. Anyway, it seems that the effect of smell on memory and perceptions of physical attraction have been well researched already, but there's been much less study into, for example, its effects on decision-making.
Indeed, which is a mystery to me, since it seems to be so relevant and applicable to everyday life. I mean, so much of our life nowadays involves making critical decisions, often within a consumer context. You'd think there would be corporate interest in this kind of study.
You're absolutely right. Well, that certainly should make us more likely to be approved for funding if we decide to extend the study.
True. And if our findings are significant, there will definitely be scope for that. Okay, should we get something on paper that we can take to Professor Ingram?
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
So now that we're sure about the topic, let's get some ideas down into the project plan. Firstly, what research are we building from?
Well, several of the studies I looked at showed quite clearly that stimuli to the olfactory system can influence how humans behave. That sounds like quite a solid basis for us to work from.
Yeah, and we can make reference to anecdotal evidence too, such as the effect the smell of roasted coffee has on house viewers, or so they say. Okay, great. So the aim of the study is to determine if the addition of certain fragrances to an environment affects human judgment. So how are we going to test that?
Well, we have to create a situation in which the participants need to make simple decisions in the presence and absence of fragrance. A simple two-group experiment seems appropriate.
Okay, so what fragrances shall we choose? And what decision? These are the key variables.
You're right. Let's start with the fragrances. How many do we need? Should we have one positive, one neutral, and one negative?
I think we want to start simple and build on it if we notice a pattern. So how about one pleasant-smelling aroma?
Yes, okay. We can do a Google search to find one of the most popular ones. What about the decision the participants are to come to?
Well, we want to gather quantitative yes, no, or numerical data from 1 to 10, which we can analyze easily.
Well, with the two-group method, we could have the groups in separate rooms, one which acts as a control and has a completely neutral odour, the other into which we introduce the fragrance.
Yes, however, we must be careful to ensure the potency of the odor is kept consistent in this room for all participants. Otherwise, our data won't be valid.
Okay, good point. Now, about the method. Apart from the presence or absence of aroma, the method should be exactly the same. The participant enters, sits down, and what next?
Well, perhaps we can give a simple informal 2-minute presentation about a new product to them.
Sure, and we can ask them to complete a form with a series of questions to determine their response to the product. For example, on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely would you be to buy this product?
Something like that. We can discuss details later anyway. Okay, what about sample size?
2 groups of 12 should be enough to confirm significance, considering that this is really just a pilot. What are our selection criteria?
Well, we just want a broad range of backgrounds and ages, really. I'll advertise the experiment on the department portal. Oh, and we'll have to be careful not to get any participants with allergies, for obvious reasons.
Okay, good point. Right, should we go and take this to Professor Ingram for approval? We can ask him about possible rooms to use too.
All right, let's go.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about a medieval weapon. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
To continue our lecture series on medieval warfare, I shall be telling you today about a weapon known as liquid fire, sea fire, or sticky fire in medieval times. It is better known nowadays by the term Greek fire. I'd like to start with a very brief historical recap. You may recall from your school history lessons that when Rome fell in 476 AD, the lights went out, as it were, all over the western part of the former Roman Empire, and what were known as the Dark Ages began. What you may not recall, or may not have been taught, is that the Eastern Roman Empire, also known to us as Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire, continued to flourish for nearly 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. During those years, Byzantium was a centre of scholarship and kept much of the knowledge from ancient Greece and Rome alive. For most of this period, the Byzantine Empire was also at war, fighting to protect its borders and provinces against Islamic expansion in the south and east and attackers from the north. Greek fire was one of the weapons that kept these attackers at bay. So, what was Greek fire? What was it made of, and when was it invented? Sadly, I cannot give you definitive answers to these questions. We do know that it was a terrifying weapon that proved particularly effective in sea battles, as it could burn on water and had the property of sticking to whatever it touched. Some sources suggest that it ignited when it came into contact with water, but there is no general consensus on this point. There is more agreement on what substances could be used to put it out, namely sand or strong vinegar. The American military historian Alex Rowland has suggested that stale urine may also have been used to douse Greek fire. The origins and composition of Greek fire are equally hotly debated, if I may make a small pun here. The most widely accepted story is that first related by the Byzantine chronicler Theophanes. He said that the recipe for Greek fire was brought to Constantinople, the capital of the empire, by Kallinikos, a native of what is now Syria. The same historian recounts the first recorded use of Greek fire, which took place in 672 AD. At this time, Arab ships were blockading Constantinople. The Byzantine fleet deployed Greek fire to devastating effect, and the siege was lifted. Another topic of much speculation is what exactly this ferocious compound was made of. The contemporary accounts are unreliable and vague, and some of them may have described other forms of incendiary weapons. Modern scholarship has largely come to the conclusion that one of the main components may have been naphtha, which is a form of distilled petroleum. As the Byzantine Empire at that time controlled many of the areas where oil can be found very close to the surface of the earth, they would certainly have had access to large quantities of the raw material needed to make naphtha. From various sources, it seems likely that resin, possibly pine resin, was added to the mix, thus giving the compound its sticky quality. Other possible ingredients are sulphur and quicklime. The main reason that so little is known about the chemical composition of Greek fire is that the recipe was an extremely closely guarded state secret. It would appear that the secret was so well hidden that it ultimately got lost, because there are few records of the Byzantine Empire deploying it after the end of the 12th century. However, there is an aspect of this weapon about which there is agreement. Greek fire was deployed in 3 methods. The first was as a form of hand grenade. Earthenware pots were filled with the fire and thrown at the enemy. They would shatter on impact with the ground and release their contents, a deployment method that was also used at the time for less deadly incendiary compounds. At sea, the fire was released by means of large siphons, which released jets of fire at high speed and pressure. Eyewitness accounts speak of a terrifying noise that accompanied an attack of this type. The third method was by means of portable, handheld flamethrowers. If I could just draw your attention to the screen, you will see
That is the end of part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.